Hi, everybody. Hi. Oh, we got to wake up. Hi, everybody. Hi. Hey, I just drove from Manhattan, so I sat in traffic for 2 hours. I am thrilled to be back here. It was such a great interaction last time, so I'm really happy to continue this. Just so I know, how many of you were here last time? Okay, so a lot of you, not all of you. Okay, all right, good. So I'm just going to tell you very briefly who I am, in case, for those who don't know. I am Cindy Goldrich. I'm a mental health counselor, and I'm also a board-certified ADHD coach, which means that I have been trained specifically in life coaching, but more importantly than that, ADHD coaching, how ADHD is really impacting learning and behavior, the brain, development, and all of that. I run workshops for parents. I do teacher training. Did not bring my book, but I wrote a book. And mostly I love to get this opportunity, which is to speak to all of you and help you understand a little bit about what makes some of the typical things that we would think were so easy, not so easy, okay? As I've said before, I think parents out of love and logic, but sometimes love and logic just aren't enough, especially if you have a complex child or things are just not moving as you think they should. I want this to be interactive. If anyone has any questions, don't feel you need to wait until the end. I'm happy to entertain your questions, okay? And let's get started. I'm going to start with what is executive function and why is it so important? You know, about 10, 15 years ago, we really weren't talking about executive function very much. We've really been talking about it a lot more. And I think it's gotten to the point where most people have at least heard the term, but not everyone really understands exactly what it is. So I'm not going to do a full explanation about executive function tonight, but I do want to give you enough of a flavor so you can understand what we're talking about. Technically, what are executive functions? Well, the executive functions are the set of neurologically based skills that have to do with managing oneself and one's resources in order to achieve a goal. Basically, it's how you're doing what you intend to do. It's the brain's control center that orchestrates resources like memory, language, and attention in order to achieve a goal. So we're not talking about intelligence here, okay? Your ability to manage your executive function skills is not related to your intelligence. And I think that's what creates so much of the confusion and so much of the frustration, especially when you've got a high-achieving child, right? A child that you know academically should be performing at a certain level, and perhaps they're not. So let's take a look at what all of this is about. Your executive functions are located in the front part of the brain, prefrontal cortex. I'm not going to get that scientific with all of you, but what I want you to know is it's the last part of the brain to develop. The brain develops from the back of the brain to the front of the brain, all right? And as I said last time, the brain is typically developed by about age 25 to 30. How many of you have kids that are off at college and already in their 20s? Any of you? Yeah, so we know how stressful that can be because they are at the point where they feel like they're fully grown and ready to be launched completely, and their brains are still growing, right? But here's the important thing. Because we talked about ADHD last time, I want to just remind all of you and tell those of you who were not here that the brain does mature more slowly when you have ADHD. Certain parts of the brain do develop more slowly. So people with ADHD will have up to maybe a 30% delay in their executive functioning, okay? This doesn't mean, again, anything having to do with intelligence, and this doesn't mean that they aren't capable and aren't going to develop these skills. It just means that it may not be where their peers are, or where you would expect it to be based on their intelligence. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Okay. So I like to refer to it as the CEO of the brain, the Chief Executive Officer of the brain, because in fact it's really managing all of those different aspects. I'll show you what they are, and I'll go through a basic understanding for you, or basic explanation I should say. We have initiation and activation. Do any of you notice that your kids maybe have a hard time getting started? Yeah, and I'm seeing everyone nodding their heads, yeah. Getting started, I want you to realize, is a skill. Now, the fact that I say it's a skill should trigger your mind about something. If a kid is having a hard time learning how to read, maybe they even have dyslexia, right? A reading-based learning disability. And in the early years, we're doing a lot of intervention and support, modifying, accommodating, all sorts of things. By the time a kid gets into 4th grade, if they can't read, would we ever say, well, kiddo, you know what, we tried, we gave you all those strategies, now you just have to try harder, right? We would never do that because we realize that that's a skill that's still developing. Executive functions are skills. They are still developing, okay? So if you have a child who's having a hard time getting started, if you just say, hey, come on, kiddo, you know, it's October, we've been doing this for several weeks now, you know it's time to just get started. That's just repeating an expectation. That's not developing the skill. So if your child is behind in any of these skills, that means we need to educate, support, accommodate, or modify. Somehow we have to help them build this skill. Okay? I've got a lot of strategies around initiation. I'm going to give you a few right now, but I will send out, those of you who signed up on the newsletter, I will send out a follow-up email to this workshop. And I have a webinar that I did for, I always forget, it's either Attitude or Attention Magazine, forgive me, where I talked all about initiation. But basically, with initiation, you want to help them get started, obviously, right? You want to help them figure out, well, what do you need to do to start your engine? Sometimes you have to be part of that equation. I know that's frustrating. But sometimes we have to help them get started, even if it's just a matter of saying, hey, let's pick up the pencil. Because sometimes this is a struggle of momentum. They just really are having that harder time getting started. But some other concrete strategies, usually you will notice, at least this is what I hear from so many of the parents I work with, that it's a pattern of behavior. He always has a hard time getting dressed. He always has a hard time starting his homework. He always has a hard time, right? Whatever it is. So if it's a pattern, I say that's great, because then we can step back and we can problem solve with the child. I always think it's so important to include the child because they're the one it's for, and they've got their own insights too, right? So one of the strategies is helping them come up with a routine. When I was writing my book, I had the same routine every time. I cleared off my whole desk. I looked at my emails for 10 minutes because I knew if I didn't look at them, I was going to be thinking about looking at them anyway. Right? So I looked at my emails for 10 minutes, I put it away. That became my routine. I had signaled to my brain, I'm ready. Okay? You may notice certain sports figures will do the same time. Whether it's a golfer, every time they get up, they're going to address the ball the same way. Or David Wright, who hasn't played in a few years on the Mets. I know he's been injured, but he does the same thing every time. He fixes this glove, he fixes this glove, the bat goes out, bat comes in, goes on his shoulder. He has signaled to his brain he's ready. So he's getting into that rhythm. So that's one of the things you may want to play around with your child. It's coming up with some kind of structure and some kind of routine, some kind of pattern. And help them figure out what do you need to do to feel ready. Okay? The next executive function skill is focus. And then we have planning and organizing. Remember last time we talked about sense of time? Kids with ADHD, right? Sense of time for everybody is developmental, okay? But what's interesting is it's not equal for everybody. Anyone here have a friend or a spouse, or maybe it's you, that like is always late, but surprised that they're late, right? Sometimes the internal clock is not as accurate. But to plan and organize, what do you need to have a sense of? Time. The future, right? So we need to think about kids' developmental sense of time. It really does change. If I say to a 2-year-old, we're going to Disney next week, what's the 2-year-old going to say to me later? Are we going now? Like, is it now, right? But the thing is, we assume that by the time they're, 8 or 9 years old, they've got this grand sense of time, but they don't. Their sense of 2 months is not nearly as accurate as your sense of 2 months. So keep that in mind. So now that you know that, what does that mean in terms of breaking down long-term projects or even studying for a test? What does that imply? What do you need to do?
Smaller chunks.
Smaller chunks. But as you do those smaller chunks, it's not just smaller, it's developmentally appropriate for your child. And one of the things you may do is talk to your teachers and ask them, what is your sense of their sense of the future, okay? All right, next we have effort, which is sustaining our effort, and processing speed. Processing speed has to do with your ability to accurately perform given a certain amount of time, okay? So there's verbal processing, how quickly you're able to hear stimuli and respond to it. There's visual processing, how quickly your eye understands the stimuli and respond to it. There's a motor component. Processing speed also is variable for people, and it's developmental. And again, because we've been talking about ADHD, I believe I mentioned last time, processing speed can be weaker and sometimes much weaker in kids with ADHD. But here's one of the really important things. We've got to break the association between speed and intelligence. Okay? There is no relationship between speed and intelligence. I think, did I talk about this last time with all of you? I don't know if I did, so let me just explain. If I were to, well, in kindergarten, how do the kids in kindergarten know who the smart kids are in class? What does a smart kid in kindergarten do when the teacher asks a question? You got it, they quickly raise their hand, right? Right? So here's what happens to the slower processor. If I were to tell my kindergarten class, okay guys, I want you to look up there, and you see that there's a shape. Who knows what shape that is? Some kids would quickly raise their hand and say, it's a rectangle. But some kids, the slower processors, might be looking at that, and first they may be saying to themselves, kind of slowing it down, what shape is that? And then my kids who kind of get distracted by things, what else do you think they may be saying to themselves as they're looking at that? What else do you think they're saying?
It's purple color.
It's purple, it's blue. Well, I think it's purple, I think it's blue, right? Oh, that matches my shirt, right? Oh, there's some words in there. I know that word, blah, right? So, did they raise their hand? They didn't raise their hand. So after this happens to them time and time again, what do they start to think about themselves? I'm not as smart as those kids. And that's why I say to teachers when I do my professional development, we've got to actively make sure that we're breaking that association. And there's so many things we could do, okay? One of which is just be aware and sometimes give our kids a lag time, okay? Like when you're asking your kid, who you know sometimes processes more slowly, come on, do you want the red or the green? We gotta go, we gotta go. Which one do you want, the red or the green? And then we get frustrated because what happens? They're standing there and thinking about it. Come on, you gotta hurry up, right? So, all right, next is working memory. Working memory, you know, there's three kinds of memory. There's short-term memory, like I have to get milk, eggs, and juice, right? Then there's long-term memory. How many of you remember your childhood phone number? Most of you raising your hand. You know, our kids today probably don't even know their own phone numbers, right? They just, you know, share their contact. But that's obviously, that's your long-term memory. Your working memory, that's something that you're using, sort of your brain's search engine, okay? What do I know? What am I getting? How do I manipulate all of this? Think about one of the easiest things to think about is if you had to do long division, right? You'd be counting on your long-term memory about how to manipulate the different steps, how to multiply, how to add, subtract, all of those different variables, okay? By the way, working memory is generally weaker in kids with ADHD. And also, again, remember, it is developmental. So now what are some strategies? See, once you understand this, now let's see, what are some strategies for if you have a child who has a weaker working memory? What do? Do you just say, hey, you know what, do me a favor, Johnny? Go upstairs, get your backpack, your shoes, your tennis racket, and on the way down, could you get my water bottle? Yeah, and a lot of you are looking at me like, that's not happening with my kid, right? So what do you do? There's a hand here, yeah.
There's smaller tasks that I think down.
Smaller tasks, like reduce the number of steps. Yeah. And did you say something else?
And or write it down.
And write it down.
And
yeah,
have
those
them
are two
repeat.
great strategies.
And they can repeat back to you.
And have them repeat back to you, yes. But you notice how just that awareness that they're not trying to be these difficult kids, and they're not being lazy or disrespectful, they just maybe aren't holding all of this in their head. Can you see how that already shifts how you interact with your child? Right? Okay. Next we have self-monitoring. That's that self-talk, that little bubble in your head that guides you towards your goals, like, oh, I need to, I noticed that everyone else is taking out a piece of paper and pencil. Or last time when I did this, this is what happened, so maybe I want to adjust. or to get there, to get to that goal, these are the steps I need to do. That nice, rich internal conversation that, guess what, our kids aren't doing, not at a very young age. That's what the biggest work is goes on in your schools and at home, helping kids develop that internal conversation. Okay? One of the ways you do that is by holding on to your anxiety. And what I mean by that is, you see your kids struggling, right? Okay, what's 2 + 2? Oh, come on, that's 4, right? Give them a chance to work things out in their head. Ask them powerful questions. Okay, don't just give them all of the information. That's just a little bit that you can do that. And last, but definitely not least, is emotional regulation. Emotional regulation, okay? That's a huge issue, the ability to regulate oneself. That's why a lot of the work that I do is around calming down, right? Who do we need to calm down first, though? Ourselves, right? So, and of course, we need to give the kids the tools because, again, these are skills. If your child can't self-calm, we need to give them the skills, and us too, okay? All right, so those are executive functions. Notice it says the Center for Mental Control and Self-Regulation. I also call it the board of directors that has to do, that helps you do what you decide to do. I have this poster hanging in lots of schools. I think it's really important that all kids know what executive functions are. Because the more they know and understand it, the more they're going to be more accepting of getting support, because then it's not about a deficit mentality. It's about, hey, you know what? I notice you're having trouble planning and organizing. Let's get that manager some training. Right? Let's see what strategies and tools we can add. Okay? Any questions on any of this? I know some of you are taking a picture. Go ahead. And if we want to look a little more closely at emotional regulation.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so you show them the executive function. How do you explain to them that it's not a deficit?
It's a great question. How do you explain to them that it's not a
Because you're
deficit?
showing them like 5 things that 6 things they can't, 7 actually. Yeah, they can't do well.
That's a very fair question. One of the things I always say to parents and when I do the teacher trainings is, teachers are in a much better position to do some of this than we are as parents. Because very often when we want to sit down, I know you guys are going to go home with all this enthusiasm. Oh, I saw this lecture and this is what I learned, and you're going to want to talk to your middle school and high school kids, and what are your kids going to say to you?
I'm busy.
I'm busy. I don't want to talk about this stuff. That's why it's always great when we could do this, with the kids in school. But what do? You let them know we're all, and it sounds so cliche, but it's so true. We all have our different strengths and challenges. And, even within each of these categories, the example I always give is, listen, I don't have ADHD. I'm kind of like a type A personality. I have no sense of direction. Like, I get lost in my neighborhood, I still use my GPS, okay? Now, there's no diagnostic criteria that says I've got a disability because we don't talk that way. So I don't like to have this whole deficit model as if we're labeling anything. It's just, this is where you're struggling. Let's focus on what we can do to help you, because we all have our areas. That's why I prefer the idea of talking about these as managers, and let's get the training as opposed to, having executive function deficits. Make sense? Okay. Just real quickly, what's emotional regulation? Emotional regulation is your ability to understand and accept your emotional experience. Okay? And just to let you know, this is not, if you have a child or you yourself, whoops, I didn't mean to go that fast, I'm sorry. Have difficulty with emotional self-regulation. This is not a mood disorder. This doesn't mean there's anything wrong with the emotions. It's your ability to manage expressing your emotions. Okay, and that's where we need to do the work. That's a lot of the work that we do in the parenting. Okay? All right. So executive function skills impact a student's ability to get started, to finish their work, to remember their chores and assignments, to execute rote memory tasks, to write well-organized essays, to remember what is read, and to accurately judge the passage of time. All right? Involved in all of these different aspects, and more, of course. These are just a few of the areas. Now, does anyone know this kid? My son won't try things he can't do right away with these. I tell him all the time, you're so smart, you could do it. But that doesn't work. Remember what I said, parents parent out of love and logic. We're trying to just encourage that kid. You got this. Just keep going, right? The thing is, there are challenges to learning. Because kids sometimes lack motivation. And kids sometimes avoid a challenge. Who else avoids a challenge, by the way? Yeah, someone was honest. Someone said us, right? Yeah, the adults. We all do sometimes. And kids sometimes break down when the work gets hard. Okay? So the big challenge is they may know what to do, but do they know how to rally the resources to do it when they need to do it? What are we going to do to help these kids want to learn? Okay? Now, I'm going to show you a video. I believe my volume is good, but let me just see.
Whoa, that's not good.
Oh, I don't need this. I'm already late.
Somebody will come. Anybody out there?
Do you have a phone?
No. Sorry. Somebody! Hello? There are 2 people stuck on an escalator and we need help. Now, would somebody please do something?
Help!
I don't believe this. You gotta be kidding me.
I'm gonna cry.
No, well, there's not enough left to do, is there?
Hello? Hey, don't worry about it. I'll fix it in a second.
He said he could fix it. All right. All right. That's more like it. He says he can fix it.
Walking down the sidewalk, kicking my feet as I'm moving to the music. Step to the beat. I woke up today, canceled all my plans, and I stepped right outside with my guitar in my hands, and the notes became loud as the sound caressed the air, and I kicked it up a notch as I strolled without a care, 'cause I'm going down the road to a brand new place, and I'll get there with a smile.
That's called Stuck on an Escalator. Anyone relate to that? It's sort of like, teacher, my pen broke. Yeah? What are we going to do about it? Right? What do you think that's about? What's going on there?
Empowerment.
Huh?
Empowerment.
Empowerment.
Empowering yourself to realize you have a solution that's right in front of you. But
Yeah, I don't think he thinks he does
No.
he? Yeah. It's sort of like a learned helplessness, or just, right? They don't feel that they have the ability to solve the problem. So it turns out that before learning can happen, one must have one must believe they have the ability to learn. He doesn't believe he has the ability to solve his problem, right? So a student's response to a challenge arises from his or her beliefs about their intelligence. Now I'm going to show you the work of Carol Dweck. Some of you may have heard of her. Okay, she did some really great research several years ago, where what she did was she took a group of 7th graders, typical learners, okay, and she and her researchers took the kids out of the classroom one at a time to a separate location and had them to work on a puzzle. And based on doing that puzzle, they said one of 2 things to the child, and they wanted to see, well, what's going to happen based on what we say? Will it matter what we say to the kid? And then they gave the kids more puzzles to do. They wanted to see how they responded. And then they gave the kids some choices. Do you want to do puzzles like these? Or I've got these really challenging ones. They'll be really hard, but you'll learn a bunch of neat stuff. You know, which ones do you want to do? And they wanted to see what happened. Okay? Here's what happened. So half the kids were told, you must be smart. And the other half of the kids were told, you must have really worked hard. So when we say, you must be smart at this, what are we praising the kids for?
Success.
Success and
Intelligence.
right? You must be smart. You can do it, you're smart. As a result, here's what happened. The kids focused on looking smart. Why not? That's what they were getting the pat on the back for, right? So when the next puzzle came, they were just focused on, I better be able to do this, because if I can do this, I am smart. And as the puzzles became more difficult, they showed lower levels of confidence, motivation, and performance. Their level of performance, compared to this other group I'll show you, was not as high. Okay? Their level of confidence went down. Why did it go down? They weren't succeeding, therefore what did they start to think about themselves? They're not what? Smart. Interestingly, they were more willing to lie. I'm not saying they all lied, but when Sam comes back in the room and Johnny says, hey, how'd you do on that puzzle? What do you think Sam's going to say? I did great, no matter how he did, right? Because he wants his friends to think he's smart. And they also became more risk averse. Hey, you want to try a puzzle like this, or we've got these other challenging ones? Which one do you think they would choose? I'll do the ones like this, right? Now let's look at the other group. What are we praising them for here if we say you must have really worked hard?
Effort.
Their effort. Absolutely. And as a result, that's what they focused on. They focused on their effort, not the result. And their level of confidence, motivation, and performance went up. Now, this was randomly done. Why would their level of performance be higher than the first group? What were they doing that the first group wasn't doing? Any ideas?
Perseverance.
Sorry?
Perseverance.
Persevering. That's right. Those terms, grit and perseverance, that we're always looking for in kids, right? They weren't giving up. They were trying over and over, because what were they getting praised for? Trying over and over, right? So these kids were more willing to try the more difficult tasks. They didn't care that it was more challenging. It didn't matter if they succeeded. It mattered that they really worked at it. Okay? So there are two types of mindsets that Carol Dweck identified, and this is what she called it. A fixed mindset and a growth mindset. In a fixed mindset, you believe that your intelligence and your expertise are based on fixed, unchangeable traits. Okay? Some people are smart, some people aren't. Now, just so you realize, most of us have areas in our lives where we have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. I know for me, I grew up thinking I'm not artistic and I'm not athletic. Those weren't areas I succeeded as a child, therefore I'm not good at those things, right? So when new challenges came about, I wasn't going to take them on. You view effort as fruitless or worse because either you get it or you don't. What's the point of trying? You know how I know the people that have the fixed mindset versus growth mindset very easily? I'm not going to ask you to write yourselves out here. That box from IKEA comes, or the new toy that has to be built, right? One of two reactions. Either, wow, this is cool, I can't wait to build it, or what's the other reaction?
Need help.
I can't do that, you do it. Right? I don't build. I'm not good at this stuff. But you see that. It's not even like the person read the directions and came to an evaluation. That's the fixed mindset. Okay? You avoid a challenge. You give up easily. And that self-talk that we talked about is usually negative. Oh, I can't do this. I've never succeeded at this before. You view the criticism and the success of others as threatening. And the value of the activity is dependent on the outcome. But when you have a growth mindset, you believe, hey, you know what? Your intelligence and your expertise can be developed through your effort and through perseverance and instruction. You demonstrate a desire to learn, you recognize that your brain and talent are just the starting points. Okay? It's instruction, it's effort, all of that. That's going to help you get there. You embrace a challenge, you persevere, you're using positive self-talk, and you view the criticism and the lessons of others as instructional, as helpful. Hey, you got a 90, I only got a 70. How did you do that? What strategies did you use, right? And the value of the activity is not dependent on the outcome. It's the journey, so to speak. Okay? Now, why does mindset really matter? Well, first of all, motivation and willingness to face challenges requires you have a positive outlook on your abilities, your potential, and your opportunity for growth. What's the voice inside their head telling them? Are they worried about failure, or being judged, or being left out or cut out? And are they focused on looking competent, smart? And what are the messages that they're getting from those around them, the teachers, their peers, their family members? And by the way, I think teachers teach out of love and logic also, just like parents. It's not that people aren't caring when they're giving messages that may not be helpful. We're all trying to do the best we can, right? So let's look at how we're going to switch that around a little bit. We're going to talk about how do you impact the mindset. Well, first of all, we're going to teach kids how learning happens, but literally, we're going to teach kids how learning happens. Then we're going to create a growth mindset culture in home and school, and we're going to help kids believe, of course, that they can learn. So this is what we're going to teach them about the brain, and it's really very simple, and I always suggest start young and repeat often. Because again, developmentally kids are going to get this on deeper and different levels, okay? Here's what we need to teach them. Not that scientific. Do I have any science people here? All right, well, we'll just ignore that because this isn't going to be perfectly accurate, okay? So give me a pass on this. But here's your brain, okay? And here is your prefrontal cortex. What did we say is in the prefrontal cortex? That's the thinking part of the brain. That's your executive function skills, okay? Next, we have our limbic system. The limbic system is where you have the hippocampus, which is going to link new sensory input to form, store, and process memories. Think of it as the middle part of the brain. I know it's not exactly in the middle, okay, but that's where we want all that information to get and stick. And then, of course, we have the amygdala, which is involved in experiencing emotions. That's the back part of the brain, okay? By the way, the back part of the brain, the amygdala, you know what else it's called? The reptilian part of the brain, exactly. What is reptilian? What does that make you think of? The primitive part of the brain, right? Okay. And then your brain has neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity means that our brains change physically when we learn new things and have new experiences. Literally, I want you to realize when you think inside your head, your brain changes right now as you're sitting here and learning, okay? So, every time you learn something new, your brain is going to form a new connection. Here's what it looks like. That's A and that's B. Okay, these are your neurons. What happens is the dendrites are going to bring the information to the cell body. The axons are going to take the information away from the cell body. And then the information from one neuron is going to flow across the synapse via chemicals called neurotransmitters. Again, that's as technical as we're going to need to get right now, okay? But here's what's important. The more you practice and review something, the stronger your neuron connections become. And there are lots of activities that you can do that can help concretize this for kids. One of the activities that I like, and you can do this in kindergarten, you can do this in 12th grade, you have each kid make their own cell. Now, of course, for the kindergarten kids, you may take a bunch of pipe cleaners and, you know, they're going to bundle it up and that's their cell. For the older kids, you may have them label their dendrites and their axons, etc., etc. Okay, but everyone's got their own cell. Okay? Then you get a bunch of pieces of string and you pair them up and you give them a really complex thing to memorize, complex fact. And every time I repeat that fact, I'm going to throw a piece of string to my partner over there and they're going to tie it onto their cell. And then they're going to repeat the fact and they're going to throw a string back to me and I'm going to tie it on. and I'm going to go back, and he's going to go back over and over again. And what's going to happen after a while to that string? It's going to get thicker and thicker, right? When it's just one string, we can cut it pretty easily, can't we? But if it's thick string, it's a lot harder to cut. So what we're showing here is that the neurons that fire together wire together. Every time you repeat this over and over, you're making a stronger connection in your brain. So the neurons that fire together wire together. Can you guys say that for me? The neurons that fire together wire together. All right, can we say that a little louder? You ready? The neurons that fire together wire together. Did you see that just happen in your brain? When you repeated it that second time, did you see that it really flares up? That's what's happening. The more you do it, the more it happens. So the weaker connections are pruned away, just like we do with plants or trees. So use it or lose it. That's why the information that you don't use that much, you don't remember anymore. Of course, when we get older, even the information we do use a lot, we don't always remember, right? Mm-hmm. But that's why when kids study, like they cram at the end and they're just like kind of remembering it, it's not necessarily all the way into that hippocampus, into that deeper part of the memory. Okay? So, I'm going to show you another video at the beginning, and I hope it plays nicely. I know the internet, I guess it's not as strong here, but at the beginning you're going to see LeBron James. And then you're going to hear another voice. Who was the famous basketball player before LeBron James?
Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Do you know, I did this for a bunch of middle school kids, and they didn't know who Michael Jordan was. That's scary. They knew about his sneakers, but they didn't know who he was. But anyway, I digress. Okay, so here we go.
What should I do? Should I admit that I've made mistakes? Should I remind you that I've done this before? Want to see my shiny new shoes? Should I just sell shoes? Shiny new shoes? Maybe I should just disappear.
Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I led you to believe it was easy when it wasn't. Maybe I made you think my highlights started at the free throw line and not in the gym. Maybe I made you think that every shot I took was a game winner. That my game was built on flash and not fire. Maybe it's my fault that you didn't see that failure gave me strength, that my pain was my motivation. Maybe I led you to believe that basketball was a God-given gift and not something I worked for every single day of my life. Maybe I destroyed the game. Or maybe you're just making excuses.
Basically, Michael was saying, hey, maybe it was my fault, I made it look too easy. You didn't realize how much effort was involved. Yeah?
And there was the implication that it wasn't a fixed mindset. He wasn't just born like that. And I definitely seen this, you know, my wife is a musician, and they talk about muscle memory. Why do they repeat the same piece over and over and over and over? You're wiring your hands, you're wiring your hands. The same thing with basketball. But
That's
I wonder,
right.
how do you see it, like in a broader, you know, not just a physical
Not,
kind of
that's a great question. I've heard that question before. Like, you can see that in music. You can see that there's so many different ways that we see that. How about, I'll tell you what are some role models in mass media now in terms of reality TV shows? What reality TV shows would you say are showing people that have a growth mindset? Any ideas? There's a bunch of them out there now. Huh?
Shark Tank.
Shark Tank? Okay, that wasn't one I thought of, but I can see why you'd say that. What other reality shows do people really challenge themselves, start off at one place and end up at a totally different place? Huh? Dancing with the Stars, that's what I always think of. I mean, those people, when they start out, I've never watched the whole season, but I know that the premise is when you start out, they really can't dance at all, and then at the end, look at how they're doing. What other ones?
The Biggest Losers.
Huh? The Biggest Loser? Yeah. Survivor. Amazing Race. Now again, many of those are physical, but these are kind of broader. It's about, well, let's do this, and then we'll kind of add on to that a little bit. So what do we know about Michael Jordan? What's some little trivia we know? Michael Jordan did not make his high school basketball team. Legend has it he went home and cried. right? I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take a game-winning shot and missed. I failed over and over and over again in my life. That's why I succeed. Fixed mindset or growth mindset? Growth mindset, right? By the way, that's something he wrote that I strongly recommend. I Can't Accept Not Trying. And I'm sure some of you have read this book. Anyone here read The Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell? There's a chapter in that book called 10,000 Hours to Mastery, where he talks about the Beatles and Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, right?
And Agassi, I think that's
Is Agassi in there? I forget it. I read it so long ago. But all of these people who truly, it's about the hours that they put into their craft to become who they are. Okay? I think it's a great book for middle school and high school kids to read. All right? At least that chapter. Yes?
Yeah, I think they said too, this new Leonardo book that's out, they said that to like draw the Mona Lisa, he like dissected tons of mouths to learn all the muscles.
That's interesting. I'm not familiar with the book. So you're saying that...
This print is coming out, but they were interviewing the author today who said like he dissected like just
thousands.
He was a scientist as well as an artist.
Right. Leonardo absolutely was a scientist. Yeah.
Think they smiled just right. So it's like hours and hours of study.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, those who are truly expert in their craft over and over and over and over. And even if it's not something like a sport or an art, let's say it's learning your craft in business or as a lawyer, you're still reading and reading and reading and learning and discussing. You're reinforcing all the different aspects. And that's what you're doing. You're creating those stronger connections. So Carol Dweck's research on 7th grade students clearly showed that those who had explicitly had training in a growth mindset and a basic education about the brain, not so different than I just gave you guys. I mean, really, we don't have to get much more complex than that. Showed significantly greater improvement academically than compared to the kids who just learned the study skills. So what she did was she took her 7th grade class, broken in half. Half the kids were given study skills for the math. The other half were given the same study skills for the math and a brief lesson about the brain. Here's what she found. Many of the students reported using the image of their neurons making new connections to motivate themselves in school, saying that they pictured their neurons forming new connections when they paid attention in class, and when tempted to not study, they rejected that idea on grounds that the new connections could not be formed. Wow. We just gave kids a reason to study, didn't we? Right? Your brain is your most important muscle. The more you use it, the stronger those neuron connections become. So all your kids that are into weightlifting, right? We want them lifting that important muscle. Okay? So remember I said the amygdala, the back part of the brain. I think stress is the gatekeeper to learning. And I think that stress is in the classrooms and it's in the house and it's impacting everyone and everything. Okay? Here's what's happening. There's your brain again. Okay? When stress comes in, the negative emotions increase the hormone cortisol, which dulls cognition. Where's the cognition? Front part, the thinking part, right? What's happening is the CEO of the brain is shutting off. And the prefrontal cortex turns on and the reflective rapid responses of the amygdala turn on. The brain goes into survival mode because remember we said the back of the brain is the primitive reptilian part of the brain? The brain's going into survival mode. What does the brain look like in survival mode? Fight, flight, and freeze. Right? That's why my parent workshop is called Calm and Connected. Because I know that no learning is going to take place, no problem is going to be solved. Empathy becomes challenging when there is not calm. That's where it all has to start and always return to. Okay? So, something you know well, something you're learning. The brain can actually rewire itself, and yes, guys, us too. Us older brains, okay? So which one is the one that you know well and which one is the one that you're learning? What's your guess?
This is the one on the right is the one you know.
Huh?
The one on the right is the one you know well.
The one on the right is the one you knew well, yeah. Because that's where you're seeing all those connections. Those are real pictures, by the way. Those are not drawings. This is really what's going on inside your brain. So we want you to see yourself as a learner. This is not a cloud, this is actually a brain. I'm sorry, it's not my best graphic, okay? But what do you want to get better at? And talk to your kids about what's something you want to get better at. It doesn't just have to be academics, as, you know, especially at home, you want them to feel like this isn't just more about school, right? So what's something you want to get better at? Because right now, they're your neuron connections. So what can you do to make more neuron connections fire so that it starts to look like this? Right? Does that make sense? Okay? So what can you say to yourself? Well, these are some fixed mindset statements. All right, and by the way, don't feel like you have to write any of these down because I get this right off the internet. Just go to Pinterest and just type in growth mindset statements and you will come up with lots of really cool, teachers have made wonderful posters and parents have made wonderful posters that they hang around. So if the kid is saying, I'm not good at this, well, instead let them start saying, well, what am I missing? I'm awesome at this. Well, that's actually a fixed mindset, isn't it? It's like, I'm done, I'm awesome, right? So what's the next step in your learning? And this is the thing, we want to constantly be helping them reframe that self-talk, okay? So that the message that they're telling themselves and the message that we are telling them is something that's going to help them feel like they've still got the potential, that their effort can move them forward, okay? Now, interacting is a wonderful way to build executive function skills. Living your life out loud and letting them see how you learn and how you do what you do. So for instance, dinner on the table seems to just show up, right? Somehow it just shows up. But if you're the one cooking dinner, you might say, you know what? I'm going to make chicken tonight. And we're going to have dinner around 6:30, so chicken takes me about, 50 minutes, 55 minutes to cook. It takes another 20 minutes to prepare. I think I better start dinner at, and I forget what time I said we were having dinner, but you get the idea. Subtract that time. So that they're not just seeing the end result. You want them to hear your process. You want them to hear your mistakes, too. I always tell teachers, I'm sure there are lesson plans you've written that you've ripped up because you said that's not a good idea. So maybe you want to tell the kids, you know what, my intention is to teach you this. I was going to teach it this way. I realized that wasn't going to work, so I ripped that up, and now I'm going to teach it this way. Let's see how that works. All right? Interactive imaginary play. I know your kids are older now, and I know you're probably thinking, I don't play with my kids anymore. Guess what? We need to bring play back. I forget if I mentioned this last time. Has anyone here seen the movie, or maybe you guys have shown it, Screenagers?
No.
Yeah.
Did you show it here? Yeah. It's a hugely powerful movie. We've got to start countering some of that. I just showed it on Long Island, and I ran a panel discussion around that. And there was a teenager in the audience, and I'm just going to share this. I know it doesn't have to do with this, but it was just so powerful. It still sticks with me. She was saying how there's so much pressure to keep up with the conversation, right? All their conversations. It's not just about being addicted to it's what it's doing. So there's so much pressure. And she finally realized, because she was getting a little older, she said, and she really wanted to be doing better in school, that, you know what? I don't want to stay up till 1 o'clock in the morning, and I'm always scared I'm missing out on the conversation, but does it really matter if I don't find out till 8 in the morning what they were talking about? But that's part of what's going on for these kids. There's this whole, it used to be after homework you could play, or it was like you were playing, you were doing homework. The two were so separate, but now they're playing while they're doing their homework so much, and we can't even see it. So just something to think about in that whole equation. But play, board games. I mean, these are great. There's no reason you can't do board games with your kids. Building, cooking, packing for trips. If you are packing your kid's suitcase, I don't care if they're in 2nd grade or 12th grade, don't, okay? It's a great way to build executive function skills. Okay? It's a great way to think about what do we need, where are we going, what should I wear, how much room do I have, all of that. Unstructured media time. Okay, these are all ways we're going to help them build those skills. So the thing is, when you plant lettuce, if it doesn't grow well, you don't blame the lettuce, right? You look at the reasons why it's not doing well. Maybe it needs fertilizer, more water, less sun, but you never blame the lettuce. So you're going to develop strategies for your own child's individual style. Parent the child you have, embrace their differences, okay? Stay calm, promote the growth mindset mentality, encourage thinkers and learners. Don't worry about the performance. The first question you ask them can't be what you get on the test. The question should have come after the test. How do you feel you did? How, were you able to use those strategies? And then when they get the test back, okay, what worked for you in your study strategies and what didn't work for you? Okay, we'll talk about that stuff next time. Pay attention to what you and how you praise. Focus on their process and enjoy watching them grow, because you're going to miss it. Trust me, my kids are out of the house, you're going to miss it. I know it's all the stress now, okay? But don't blame the lettuce, okay? What kind of questions, feedback, comments? Yes?
You talked about emotional regulation is about managing the ability to manage expressing emotions. Can you just?
I'm sorry, the ability to?
Is the ability to manage expressing emotions.
Yes.
Can you give a couple of, because
Sure.
we all have teenagers and you got the whole hormone thing in the equation too, so some examples of how you might help at home, helps somebody learn how to express their emotions better?
Sure.
To avoid.
Part of it's how we respond to them when they do it. So when you put dinner on the table and it happens to be macaroni and cheese, and your kid says, "I'm not having mac and cheese for dinner," what are some of the things you guys say to your kid? Starve, yeah. Really, I'm really asking. Go ahead, starve. What else?
Yes, you are.
Yes, you are. Yeah, what else?
Speak to me in a nicer way.
Speak to me in a nicer way. See, the thing is, we so often just respond to them that no one's correcting their emotion. We're getting caught up in managing their emotion and not giving them a chance to redo it. So that's some of it. That's really some of it. Just.
Yeah. What do you do then if they, I often do that, but then the response is, no, I'm not being such and such, angry. That's not an angry voice either.
Yeah.
So.
You know what? I would love to give you those quick, oh, do this, do this, do this. And I'm not trying to do this as a bait and switch, but literally, see what session I cover consequences in my workshop? Session 6. Why? Because I know there's so much we need to do before we talk about what do you do if. Because there's so much behind the scenes, background, proactive work we need to do. Because in the moment, very often all you could do is what you've always been doing. You got to just manage the situation. There was another commenter hand somewhere. I heard someone, yeah.
That was interesting what you just said about the speak to me in a different way. So that's like.
I'm sorry about the
comment that was just then about as a new way of correcting. So in golf, I think they call it a mulligan. We give you a mulligan on that one.
Yeah.
Speak to me in a better and nicer. But yeah, I like that.
Not a golfer, but I know so many. I understood that. Yes.
There's so much talk about mindset, and I know that it's coming in more to the community, but sometimes when you talk to about these things to your children, you sound like the only crazy nut talking about these things, and they're hearing all of this natural talent, and we have a very, our society is very into the natural talent. We love that story. We love the Cinderella story, and that's the story that they hear over and over and over and over again. And it's so appealing that it gets repeated so many times. How do you not seem like a crazy person when you're like, it's not natural talent, it's effort?
Okay, I'll tell you a story from my life, all right? Because I really do believe that we need to make this real for the kids. So when I was in my late 40s, I had never been a bicycle rider. very much. I could ride 4 miles, you know, I used to ride the kids to school, whatever, and that was about it. But for various reasons, I decided to sign up for a 100-mile bike ride. Anyone here a road biker? Got one, that's it, just one, okay. So I decided to sign up for a 100-mile bike ride. It was March, the bike ride was in May. The team had started training in February. I was doing it with one of the charities called Team in Training. I don't know if any of you know it. I showed up my first day. I didn't know from road biking. I showed up in what they called my cement truck because it wasn't a road bike with its skinny tires. I didn't know from clipping in. I didn't know if that diaper thing, you know, the little jersey thing that you wear. I just showed up. And the coach said, don't worry, I'll stay back with you today. We're doing 35 miles. And I just thought, okay, like if I do 10, I'll think like, wow, but that's it. She stayed with me the whole time, and she just kept saying, just look at the next tree, just look at the next pole, try this, adjust that. And by the end of the day, I did my 35 miles. Of course, the next morning when I woke up, and I tried to walk down the stairs, I thought I was going to fall over, okay? But I did it. Great. But the next week when I show up, guess what? Now we're up to 40. Next week we're up to 45. We're up to 50. You getting the idea? And I am proud to say that I did my 100-mile bike ride. Now remember what I said, I was never an athlete. It's the story you tell yourself. Here's the story I told myself. My parents, who are still alive, who are in almost 90 now, very heavy smokers. Now, they both quit in their early 80s because they had decided in their 50s that they were going to quit when they were in their 80s. Cold turkey, they both quit. True story, okay? But I grew up in the house where, you know, the windows were up and the smoke, the secondhand smoke and everything else. Anyone grow up in a house like that? Yeah, many of us did, right? So the story I told myself was, I can't be an athlete. I've got all that secondhand smoke and that's just not me. But with the motivation, okay, and that's again one of the pieces that we always have to work on. I was raising money now for a charity that meant something to me. I had raised over $10,000 and there was no way I wasn't making that 100-mile bike ride, right? And I had the support, the constant support of my team, and I did it. In fact, I will proudly say that I've now done 6 century rides, and 2 of them were in Lake Tahoe. What do you guys know about Lake Tahoe? The mountains, right? And if that wasn't enough, then my cocky friends said, okay, we've done the bike riding now, let's go run. I'm like, I don't run. Like, come on, we can run. So now I've done 2 half marathons. Now, why do I say that? Because I'm no different than you guys. You are going to show your kids a growth mindset by how you are living your life. Show them something that you have overcome, something that you are challenged by. Maybe you're all going to take on a challenge together. Okay, and I will tell you all right now, if you do take on a challenge, and you do one of these endurance events, there's plenty, I mean, you can raise money for anything these days, right? Send me a note, send me a link, and I'm happy to sponsor you. I try to put that out there as my motivation to all of you, okay? But that's it, we've got to make this real. We've got to live it if we want them to believe it. Yes?
Can I add something that's slightly more manageable than 100 miles that you do?
Oh, don't give up so easily. Go ahead, yeah.
Well, my family does it, and we do it as a family. We just go hiking.
Yeah.
And just making it to the top of Turkey Mountain with an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old and looking out at the view, and you're all in it together, and you know, someone's knees hurt, or you know, the dog's doesn't want to go. Someone doesn't want to go, but you all do it and you make it, and it feels really good. Now, sometimes
Absolutely.
when they're younger, I called it a nature walk, so that, you know, hiking was like 100 miles to me.
Exactly, right.
So that's actually, I found, as if it's helpful. Another thing we've done is camping. And I know some people are like, oh, it's disgusting, it's buggy. Even if you do it in your backyard, as a family, again, like you're all learning something, you're in it together, you're overcoming the bugs or the sun or putting the tent up or whatever. And those 2 things that we've done have really made a huge difference to actually everybody, not just the one with the ADD.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something about camping. I had never gone camping in my life, okay? I was sort of wanted to, but I was a little, you know, it's camping, and that's a little freaky and weird and everything else. Well, my daughter now lives in Colorado, and
Yeah.
like camping to her is like, bye mom, I'm going off grid for 2 days and I'm going camping, which is a little freaky when you think
Yeah.
about it, especially since she's out there because she also loves rock climbing. So I know that when she's out there, she's like, that,
Yeah. Very
But
amazing.
when I was out there this last time, I said, all right, Carls, we're doing this. And we did. We went camping, and I got over it. And it really took that mindset of
Growth mindset.
yeah. And that's the other piece I want to remind you guys. Once you've had one of these peak experiences, you can do anything. I mean, when I come back to a challenge now, I put myself on that mountain. Because let me tell you, it was not easy riding up that mountain, but if I could ride up that mountain, that meant I had what? Perseverance, grit, stamina. I didn't give up, all of those things. So that's what you want your kids to realize. If you can do this, how can we transfer this to this? All right? Yeah.
But now you're dealing with an ADHD kid who's got all these executive functioning.
One
issues that
step
you don't.
at a time.
But so say you get the kid to study for one test and they've made flashcards and they've done marvelously well. And the next time comes, it's like the same thing. It's like the resistance to
Part
do
of
like
this-
all of this stuff makes perfect sense to
I know.
neurotypical, motivated. But
No,
a lot
it
of
makes,
these
I
kids
will tell you,
aren't,
it
so.
is more challenging. Like I said, parents parent out of love and logic, but when you have a complex child, it is harder. But that's why we have to do all the different steps so that it's not just, right there. We can't have that quick answer. A lot of this is just how we're structuring everything. One step at a time, I promise you.
Right, but you say, a kid who doesn't want to sit and learn, just wants to plug into the headphones or whatever to escape it all. Now I should take her aside and tell her how her brain works and whatever. I can't really have a conversation,
I
about
understand,
anything.
and that's why-
Leave me
that's
alone,
why-
I'm busy. I have too much work. Why are you trying to make me think about something else?
Actually, you know what the excuse I used to hear from my kids? The teacher didn't assign it. I don't have to. Right?
Yeah.
Which is why I so badly want to bring the, you got to do this in the school because that's where, some of it happens. Yeah. Yes.
At what point, you're trying to teach them to self-regulate, but you take Elaine's example there, at what point do you just go on the family-based and turn off the phone? Or is that counterproductive?
Generally, I'm going to say it's counterproductive. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. Did a whole session with a client today about that exact issue, and she's already has all the foundational pieces, and we needed to pull it together because you're creating more of that.
It's because it's not their, my experience with that sort of situation is because it's not their initiative, that when they make the initiative to do that.
It's a lot of those issues. It's not their initiative. It's not solving the problem. They'll substitute one thing with another. I mean, it's complex. It's complex. I don't have a quick. It's not that I don't have a quick, easy answer. It's just we have to really piece it apart. Yeah. 2 more questions and then.
Do you know if there's any science behind ADHD children who are distracted, listening to music or having something else on while they're doing
Yes,
their
there's a
homework?
lot of research about that. And the research all supports that movement activates the underactive part of the brain. So for some kids, listening to music is actually helping them. Think of it as white noise. Okay, it's drowning out.
Right.
And it doesn't have to be classical music. It could be whatever music is going to be in the background for them. So yes, the research absolutely supports it.
I'm not going to fight that battle anymore. Thank you. My son will be so happy. It's
Last time
counterintuitive to
you
me.
also mentioned
The fidgeting?
somebody fidget.
Exactly.
Some kids it would be helpful.
Right.
Others would then become distracted.
It's some kids it'll be helpful. Everyone's got to figure out their way. Like I just noticed I was playing with my ring because it's a new ring and it's like one of these rings that has like the 3 pieces. Okay. It's just, and I don't have ADHD, but still it's there, and you fidget with it. Like everyone needs to find their own way, but you want to help them understand their brain so that they're not playing their brain. There's one other question? Yeah.
So one expert says that kids should always have the same work area, they should have a desk, they should have the desk work. Another expert says your kids should work where they feel the most comfortable, right? So mine we always set up the desk, he always goes to the bedroom. What's your opinion?
My opinion is where the kid's comfortable. But, you know, and we'll talk about that a little bit in the next session, when we talk about homework. But listen, I mean, there is no one right way. I bet if we took a survey of where you guys all like to do your reading or do whatever work you need to do, everyone's got their own way. So don't assume that you know their best way. Remember, you're trying to grow a child who's going to go out into the world. You want to help them develop those thinking skills so that when they're in new settings, they know what process they use to figure out what works for them.
But if they go up to their bedroom and they get distracted because suddenly they have a desire to clean out their drawer or do whatever, and you can't see
I
them.
like that desire.
Well, it's amazing how suddenly they want to organize something when they've got a test to study
It's a
for.
whole
or whatever,
process,
and
like
you
I
don't
said,
see
the
them.
consequences, you can't jump in with consequences. Because when you do, has it been working?
Sorry, do you say, that statement you just said, do you say that to teachers? You don't know their way? How do you translate that to the classroom? I'm curious, because that was interesting.
It depends on
Like,
the
do you say that
classroom and the
to
need.
teachers, or?
In general, yeah. And again, I know that teachers are in a different situation because they need to manage the whole class, but there are still nuances of, you know, where we can understand the child and what we can do to accommodate that.
Do all teachers have ADHD background training?
I'm going to let you. The question was, do teachers have ADHD training?
It's very varied. I
Yeah.
think
It's not mandatory.
older teachers have more, as far as what they've gotten in their training to become a teacher. Of course, there's a lot of professional development along the way. for all of
Exactly.
our
A lot of
teachers,
it's after. I will tell you that my daughter, who is a special ed teacher, she's now in her 3rd year as a resource room teacher, and she just graduated from University of Delaware a few years ago. I had her sit through my full day professional training, and she said, "Mom, I didn't learn all this stuff." Like, she learned some of it, but she didn't learn all
What
of it.
about if they have if a kid has an IEP for that and is in a class, is the teacher required or
No.
required
to have, I guess, the background for their training?
That's not true. I don't think that's
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right, guys. Thank you. As I said, I'm happy to send out little follow-up information for all of you if you signed up on the newsletter. Even if you signed up last time, I need to know that you're here this time if you want me to send information out. So.
You're sending information about this.